A hardened Marine, trained for combat, froze in panic when he spotted a young boy flashing an SOS signal on a quiet suburban street. Was it a prank? A cry for help? What he discovered next would change both their lives forever. Get ready for a story of fear, courage, and the unexpected bond that save us. Before we dive into this emotional journey, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us of the power of human connection. Help us share more by supporting the channel. The signal. The evening air in Cedar Ridge was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming hydrangeas. Sergeant Daniel Reyes, a retired Marine with a shadowed past, moved steadily down Maplewood Drive, his boots hitting the pavement in a rhythm that matched his controlled breathing. His daily run was more than exercise. It was therapy. The strict routine kept the memories at bay, the ones that still crept in when the world got too quiet. His sharp eyes scanned the street out of habit, noting the usual details. A minivan parked crookedly in a driveway, a dog barking behind a fence, the distant hum of a lawnmower. Normalcy, safety, but his body never fully relaxed. Not after 2 tours overseas. Not after the things he'd seen. Then, movement, a flicker of light, deliberate and rhythmic, caught his attention from the corner of his eye. He slowed, turning his head toward the source. There, in the driveway of a modest 2-story house, stood a boy, small, maybe 10 years old, with tousle brown hair and a face too serious for his age. In his hands, a flashlight. 3 quick flashes. 3 long ones. 3 quick again. SOS. Daniel's breath hitched. His muscles tensed, instincts screaming. That wasn't just some kid playing around. That was a distress signal. The real deal. For a split second, doubt crept in. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the boy didn't even realize what he was doing. But then the kid turned, and their eyes locked. The fear in the boy's gaze was unmistakable. Daniel crossed the street in quick strides, his voice low but firm. "Hey, you okay?" The boy, Liam, Daniel would later learn, flinched at the sound of his voice. His grip on the flashlight tightened. "You know Morse code?" The question threw Daniel off. Not "help me" or "call the police." Just a quiet, almost desperate confirmation that his signal had been understood. "Yeah," Daniel said, crouching to Liam's level. "I know Morse code. What's going on?" Liam's throat worked as he swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward the house, then back to Daniel. He opened his mouth to speak. A muffled thud from inside cut him off. Liam went rigid. His breath came faster now, shallow and uneven. Daniel's pulse spiked. Something was very wrong. "Who's in there?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice steady. Liam hesitated, then whispered, "My stepdad." Another sound, a raised voice, too distorted to the walls to make out words, but the anger in it was clear. Liam's hands trembled. Daniel's mind raced. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't even on active duty anymore. But he was still a Marine. Still someone who couldn't walk away when a kid was scared. "Where's your mom?" he asked. Liam's chin quivered. He locks her in the basement when he gets mad. Ice flooded Daniel's veins. This wasn't just a bad day. This was a pattern. A nightmare hiding behind closed doors in a neighborhood where no one looked too closely. Before he could respond, a woman's scream tore through the house. Liam made a small, broken noise in the back of his throat. Daniel didn't think. He moved. "Stay behind me," he ordered, already stepping toward the front door. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. This wasn't a war zone, but the stakes felt just as high. The question wasn't if he would intervene. It was how, and whether he'd be in time. The hidden fear. The scream cut off as abruptly as it had started, leaving a silence that felt heavier than before. Daniel's fingers curled into fists at his sides, his body coiled tight like a spring. Next to him, Liam was frozen in place, his small frame trembling. The boy's eyes were wide, locked on the front door as if he expected something terrible to burst through at any second. Daniel forced himself to take a slow breath. Think. Assess. Rushing in blind could make things worse. He needed information. "Liam," he said, keeping his voice low but firm, "is there anyone else inside besides your mom and stepdad?" Liam shook his head. "No." Just them. Does he have a weapon? Another shake of the head, but then Liam hesitated. He keeps a baseball bat by the couch sometimes. Daniel nodded. Not ideal, but better than a gun. His eyes flicked to the house again, scanning for exits. The front door, a window to the left slightly ajar, a side gate leading to the backyard. Options. Another sound from inside, a crash, like something being thrown. Liam flinched. Daniel made a decision. Listen to me, he said, crouching to meet Liam's gaze. I need you to stay right here, behind this tree. Don't move. Don't come inside, no matter what you hear. If you see anyone but me or your mom come out, you run to the neighbor's house and call 911. Understand? Liam's throat worked as he swallowed, but he gave a shaky nod. Daniel straightened, rolling his shoulders back. He wasn't in uniform anymore, but the weight of responsibility settled over him like it always had. He moved toward the house, stepped silent on the paved walkway. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open just enough to slip inside, his senses immediately sharpening. The air smelled like stale coffee and something sharper. Fear, maybe, or anger. The living room was dim, curtains drawn, a single lamp casting long shadows. A baseball bat leaned against the couch, just like Liam had said. From deeper in the house, a man's voice, rough with fury. Think you can just ignore me? Huh. A whimper in response. A woman's voice, too quiet to make out words. Daniel's jaw tightened. He moved forward, footsteps silent on the carpet. The hallway led to the kitchen, and there, in the doorway, he saw them. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, his face twisted in rage, loomed over a woman half his size. She was backed against the counter, her arms raised as if to shield herself. The fear in her eyes was the same as Liam's. Daniel didn't hesitate. Hey! The word cracked through the room like a gunshot. The man spun, eyes widening in surprise before narrowing again. Who the hell are you? Daniel didn't answer. His focus was on the woman, Liam's mom. She looked at him with a mix of shock and desperate hope. The man took a step forward, his voice a growl. This is my house. You don't just walk in here. I'm leaving, the woman blurted, her voice trembling but clear. I'm taking Liam, and we're leaving. The man's face darkened. Like hell you are. He moved toward her, and Daniel was across the room in 2 strides, planting himself between them. Touch her, Daniel said, his voice low and deadly calm, and you'll regret it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the ragged sound of the woman's breathing behind him. Then the man's lip curled. You some kind of hero? He glanced at the baseball bat, still in the living room. Too far to reach before Daniel could stop him. Daniel didn't blink. I'm someone who doesn't walk away when a kid's crying for help. Something flickered in the man's expression. Uncertainty, maybe. Fear. But it was gone as fast as it came, replaced by a sneer. You don't know what you're getting into. Behind Daniel, the woman took a shaky breath. Please, she whispered. Just let us go. The man's hands clenched into fists. Daniel braced himself, ready for whatever came next. Then, a sound from the front of the house. A door slamming open. Mom! Liam's voice, high with panic. Daniel's stomach dropped. No, the kid wasn't supposed to. The distraction cost him. The man lunged, not at Daniel, but past him toward the living room, toward the bat. Daniel moved on instinct, shoving the woman behind him as he turned. Too late. The man's fingers closed around the bat, and Liam stood frozen in the doorway, his face white with terror. The breaking point. Time slowed. Daniel saw it all in horrifying clarity. The man's knuckles whitening around the bat, Liam's small frame rooted in the doorway, the mother's choked gasp behind him. Every muscle in his body screamed to act, but one wrong move could send this spiraling into violence. The man raised the bat, his face twisted with fury. You think you can just barge into my house? Spittle flew from his lips. You and this brat. Daniel didn't let him finish. In 3 swift steps, he closed the distance between them, his combat training taking over. He grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing, twisting hard until the bones ground together. The bat clattered to the floor. A guttural cry of pain. The man swung his free fist wildly. Daniel ducked, driving his shoulder into the man's ribs, sending them both crashing into the coffee table, which splintered beneath them. "Liam, take your mom outside," Daniel barked, pinning the man down with his knee. "Now!" Movement in his periphery. Liam darting forward to grab his mother's hand, pulling her toward the door. The woman stumbled, her eyes wide with shock, but she didn't resist. The man beneath Daniel bucked like a wild animal. "You're dead," he snarled. "You hear me? Dead." Daniel adjusted his grip, keeping pressure on the man's pinned arm. His breath came hard and fast, adrenaline singing in his veins. This wasn't war, but the same rules applied. Protect the civilians first. Neutralize the threat. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called 911. The man stilled at the sound, his rage giving way to something colder. "They'll arrest you, too," he hissed. "Breaking and entering. Assault." Daniel didn't flinch. "Tell them whatever you want." He leaned down until his words were for the man alone. "But if you ever go near that boy or his mother again, I won't stop at restraining you." The unspoken promise hung between them. Footsteps pounded up the porch steps. "Police!" Everyone on the ground. Daniel raised his hand slowly, moving off the man just as two officers burst through the doorway, guns drawn. Chaos erupted, shouted commands, the man sputtering accusations. Liam's mother sobbing as she clutched her son. Daniel kept perfectly still, his eyes locked on Liam. The boy stared back, his face streaked with tears, but his chin lifted. A female officer approached Daniel cautiously. "Sir, I need you to." "He saved us." Liam's voice, small but clear, cut through the noise. "That man hurts my mom." The Marine stopped him. The room went quiet. Daniel exhaled slowly as the officer's stance shifted, their focus turning to the bruised woman and the trembling child. The truth settled over the scene like dust after an explosion. One of the cops cuffed the stepdad, reading him his rights. Another guided Liam and his mother to the couch, speaking to them in low, gentle tones. The female officer studied Daniel. "You're Marine?" "Retired." He flexed his hand, only now noticing the blood dripping from a split knuckle. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "We'll need your statement." Outside, the afternoon sun painted the street in gold. Neighbors gathered on lawns, whispering. A paramedic checked Liam for injuries while his mother gave her statement, her voice growing stronger with every word. Daniel stood on the porch, watching it all unfold. This wasn't his fight. He'd just been out for a run. But as Liam turned and met his eyes across the yard, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, understanding. The kind of bond forged in the worst moments. The female officer joined him, handing over a bottle of water. "You did good today." Daniel took it, his throat suddenly tight. Kid did better. Took courage to send that signal. A pause. Then quietly, "What happens to them now?" The officer sighed. "Shelter first. Restraining order. After that?" She shrugged. "Depends." Daniel watched Liam help his mother into the ambulance, the boy's small hand gripping hers like an anchor. "Depends." The word sat heavy in his chest. He knew then this wasn't over. The aftermath. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the scuffed linoleum floors. Daniel sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair, his large frame making the seat seem comically small. He rubbed his temples, the adrenaline from earlier finally ebbing away, leaving behind a dull throb behind his eyes. Across from him, Liam and his mother, Elena, he'd learned her name, was huddled together on a bench. A social worker had given Liam a coloring book and crayons, but the boy hadn't touched them. His small hands were clenched in his lap, his eyes darting between the officers milling about in the door, as if expecting his stepfather to burst through at any moment. Elena looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her shoulders hunched forward like she was carrying an invisible weight. A paramedic had cleaned the cut on her lip and wrapped her bruised wrist, but the real wounds weren't the kind bandages could fix. Daniel clenched his jaw. He'd seen that look before, on villagers in war zones, on refugees who had lost everything. The hollow stare of someone who had been broken too many times. A door opened, and the female officer from earlier, Officer Vasquez, according to her badge, walked over, a file in her hand. "We've processed your statements," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Mr. Carter is being held overnight. Assault, unlawful imprisonment, violation of a previous restraining order." Elena flinched at the mention of the restraining order. Daniel didn't miss the way her fingers tightened around Liam's. "Previous?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Vasquez nodded. "Filed 6 months ago. Dismissed when Miss Carter didn't show up to court." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "He said he'd take Liam away if I did." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Daniel's stomach twisted. He'd seen enough to know how this worked. Threats, manipulation, fear keeping someone trapped long after they should have run. Vasquez sighed, rubbing her temple. "I've called a shelter. They have space for you and Liam tonight. After that—" She hesitated, glancing at Liam before continuing in a lower voice. "You'll need to decide if you're pressing charges. Really pressing them this time." Elena swallowed hard but nodded. A beat of silence passed before Liam suddenly spoke up, his voice small but firm. "What about Daniel?" All eyes turned to him. The boy's chin was lifted, his gaze steady despite the fear still lingering in his eyes. Vasquez blinked. "What about him?" Liam's fingers curled into the fabric of his jeans. "He helped us. Is he in trouble?" Daniel hadn't even considered that. He'd acted on instinct, but technically, he had broken into a house and tackled a man. Even if that man was a monster, the law didn't always care about intentions. But Vasquez shook her head. No, given the circumstances, his actions were justified. She shot Daniel a look. "Though next time, maybe wait for us before playing hero?" Daniel smirked despite himself. Noted. The social worker reappeared then, a kind-faced woman with a clipboard. "Ms. Carter, the shelter's van is here. They'll take you to get settled for the night." Elena stood, pulling Liam up with her. The boy hesitated, looking back at Daniel. For a moment, no one moved. Then, without warning, Liam let go of his mother's hand and crossed the room, stopping in front of Daniel. Daniel wasn't prepared for what happened next. Liam threw his arms around him in a tight hug. Daniel froze. He wasn't a hugger. Didn't know what to do with the sudden warmth pressing against him. The small hands gripping the back of his shirt, like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just crumbled. Slowly, awkwardly, he patted the boy's back. Liam pulled away just as quickly, his cheeks pink, but his expression determined. "Thank you," he whispered. Daniel cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the eyes on them. "You're the one who sent the signal, kid. That took guts." Liam's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. Elena stepped forward then, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured. Daniel shook his head. "Just get somewhere safe." She nodded, taking Liam's hand again as the social worker guided them toward the exit. Daniel watched them go, an odd tightness in his chest. He should leave. His part in this was over. He'd done what he could. But as the door swung shut behind them, Vasquez turned to him, crossing her arms. "You got a place to stay tonight?" Daniel frowned. "Why?" She shrugged. "Just figured you might want to stick around. That kid looked at you like you hung the moon." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat, because she was right, and he wasn't sure he could walk away even if he tried. Unfinished business. The shelter van's taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving Daniel standing alone in the precinct parking lot. The night air was cool against his skin, a stark contrast to the heat still simmering in his veins. He flexed his injured hand absently, the split knuckles protesting the movement. Just walk away. That's what he should do. He'd done his part. Intervened, protected, survived. That was the mission, wasn't it? Complete the objective and extract. But his boots stayed rooted to the asphalt. Officer Vasquez's words echoed in his head. "That kid looked at you like you hung the moon." A muscle in his jaw twitched. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of Afghan children who thought his unit were saviors, before they learned no one could save them from the endless cycle of war. It was a look that came with expectations, with weight. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his landlord about next month's rent. Normal life, waiting impatiently for him to return. Daniel ignored it. Instead, he pulled out his keys and got in his truck. The engine roared to life, the familiar vibration steadying him. He didn't think about where he was going. Didn't need to. The Cedar Ridge Women's Shelter was a nondescript brick building on the outskirts of town, its windows glowing softly behind heavy curtains. Daniel parked across the street, killing the engine. He told himself he was just checking, just making sure they'd arrived safe. He didn't expect to see Liam sitting on the front steps. The boy was hunched over, elbows on his knees, staring at something in his hands. Even from this distance, Daniel could see the tension in his small shoulders. Daniel hesitated. This wasn't his business. Then Liam lifted his head, and even through the windshield, the tear tracks on his face were unmistakable. "Damn it," Daniel muttered, shoving open the door. Liam startled when Daniel's shadow fell over him, hastily wiping his cheeks. In his lap was a flashlight, the same one he'd used to signal for help. "Couldn't sleep?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice neutral. Liam shook his head, clutching the flashlight tighter. "They put us in a room with bunk beds, like camp." His voice hitched. "Mom cried when she thought I wasn't listening." Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. He should say something comforting. That's what normal people did. But he'd never been good at this. So he sat down on the step beside Liam instead. The concrete was cold beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "They won't let me see him again, right?" Liam asked suddenly. "My stepdad." Daniel studied the boy's profile, the stubborn set his jaw, the way his fingers trembled even as they gripped the flashlight like a lifeline. "Not if the law does its job." Liam nodded, swallowing hard. "Good." A pause. Then quieter, "I'm glad you knew Morse code." The corner of Daniel's mouth twitched. "Yeah, me too." They sat in silence for a long moment. The shelter's front door opened, and Elena appeared, her eyes widening when she saw Daniel. "Liam, I told you not to." She stopped, taking in the scene. Her gaze flicked between her son and the Marine, something unreadable passing over her face. Daniel stood abruptly. "I was just leaving." Liam's head snapped up. "You are—" The disappointment in that single question hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He cleared his throat. "You're safe here. That's what matters." Elena stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Liam's shoulders. "Thank you," she said again, like the words weren't enough but were all she had. Daniel nodded stiffly. He turned to go. Then, "Wait!" Liam twisted out of his mother's grip, darting inside. He returned moments later, thrusting a crumpled piece of paper at Daniel. Daniel unfolded it. A child's drawing. Stick figures of a man in what might have been a military uniform, a boy holding a flashlight, and a woman smiling. Scrawled across the top in uneven letters, "Our hero." Something tight and unfamiliar constricted Daniel's chest. Liam shuffled his feet. "In case you forget about us." Daniel stared at the drawing, the simplicity of it, the faith behind those crooked lines. He carefully folded it and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Not likely, kid." He didn't promise to come back. Didn't say anything else at all. But as he walked his truck, the weight of the paper against his chest felt like the most important thing he'd carried in years. The uninvited guest. The rain started just as Daniel pulled into his driveway, a sudden downpour that matched his mood perfectly. He sat in the truck for a long moment, listening to the water hammer against the roof, the drawing burning a hole in his pocket. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Sparse, utilitarian, the only personal touch a framed photo of his unit gathering dust on the bookshelf. He tossed his keys on the counter and pulled out Liam's drawing, smoothing the crumpled edges against the worn formica. "Our hero." The words mocked him. He wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't wake up sweating through nightmares years after the war ended. Heroes didn't walk away when people still needed help. The knock at his door came just past midnight. Daniel was on his feet instantly, hand go where his service pistol would have been if he still carried. The peephole revealed a sodden figure hunched on his welcome mat. Elena. He yanked the door open. What happened? Rainwater dripped from her hair as she shook her head. Nothing. I mean, we're safe. The shelter. She trailed off, shivering. I just needed to talk to you. Daniel stepped aside wordlessly. Elena hovered in his kitchen like a ghost, her fingers tracing the edge of his countertop. They assigned us a caseworker today. She says we'll probably qualify for transitional housing. A pause. They're pressing charges against Mark. Even if I wanted to back out this time, I couldn't. Daniel filled a glass with water and pushed it toward her. That's good. Is it? Her laugh was brittle. Liam hasn't spoken more than 3 words since you left. He just keeps staring at that damn flashlight. The accusation in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Daniel crossed his arms. What do you want from me? Elena finally met his eyes. I don't know. He trusts you. After everything. Her voice broke. You're the first person he's trusted in years. The refrigerator hummed between them. Outside, the rain intensified, rattling the window panes. Daniel thought about the drawing, about the way Liam had hugged him without hesitation, about all the reasons he shouldn't get involved. One condition, he said at last. Elena went very still. You get counseling. Both of you. He held up a hand when she started to protest. Not negotiable. That kid's been through hell. He needs more than I can give him. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she nodded. Daniel exhaled. I'll come by tomorrow. She reached for his hand, then seemed to think better of it. Thank you. After she left, Daniel stood at the window watching her taillights disappear into the storm. The drawing still lay on his counter, the stick-figure Marine staring up at him with childish optimism. He grabbed his keys. The 24-hour Walmart was nearly empty at this hour. Daniel moved through the brightly lit aisles with single-minded purpose, ignoring the curious looks from the overnight stock crew. He found what he needed in the electronics section, a twin pack of flashlights with sturdy aluminum casings. The book was harder to track down, shelved between kids' activity books and military history. Morse code for beginners. The cashier raised an eyebrow as he checked out. Prepping for the apocalypse? Daniel didn't smile. Something like that. Back in his truck, he flipped through the book under the dome light. Simple diagrams, clear instructions. Exactly what a smart kid with something to prove would need. He thought about Liam's trembling hands, about the way he looked standing in that driveway, flashing a desperate signal to a stranger. Daniel tucked the book into the bag with the flashlights. Tomorrow was coming whether he was ready or not. The first lesson. The shelter's playground was empty when Daniel arrived, the morning sun still fighting its way through stubborn clouds. He parked his truck across the street, the Walmart bag dangling from his fingers as he crossed the wet grass. Liam spotted him first. The boy was sitting at a picnic table near the swing set, his legs swinging absently beneath the bench. When he saw Daniel, he froze for half a second, then launched himself forward so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. You came back. The raw hope in those 3 words made Daniel's throat tighten. He held up the bag. Told you I would. Elena emerged from the shelter's side door, her eyes widening when she saw them. She'd changed clothes, jeans and a faded sweatshirt instead of yesterday's rumpled outfit. But the shadows under her eyes betrayed another sleepless night. Daniel nodded at her. Morning. Sergeant Rez. Her fingers twisted together. I wasn't sure. Yeah. He cut her off before she could finish that thought. Me neither. Liam practically vibrated with impatience. What's in the bag? Daniel sat on the picnic table with deliberate slowness, enjoying the way Liam's eyes tracked every movement. He pulled out the first flashlight, heavy duty, with a textured grip. Liam's breath caught. This one's yours. Daniel tossed it to him. Liam caught it with both hands, turning it over like it was made of solid gold. The second flashlight came out, identical to the first. This one's mine. Then the book. Liam's fingers hovered over the cover. Morse code for beginners, he read aloud. His voice hushed. Daniel flipped it open to a dog-eared page. Thought you might want to learn the right way, instead of just SOS. For a heartbeat, Liam just stared. Then, with sudden determination, he shoved the book toward Daniel. "Teach me." Elena made a soft noise. "Liam, maybe Sergeant Reyes doesn't. I can pay you." Liam dug into his pocket, producing a handful of crumpled dollar bills and loose change. "I've got $4.37, and I can get more. The vending machine in the lobby gives change if you—" Daniel put a hand over Liam's fist, gently pushing the money away. "No charge." Liam's brow furrowed. "But why would you?" "Because you asked." Daniel sat on the picnic bench, the wood creaking under his weight. He positioned the flashlight in his left hand. "First rule of Morse code: short taps are dots. Long presses are dashes. Watch." He demonstrated slowly. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. Liam's eyes lit up. SOS. "Your turn." The next hour passed in a blur of concentrated effort. Liam's small fingers struggled with the flashlight button at first. His attempts at Morse code more enthusiastic than accurate. But by the 10th try, his rhythm improved. "Good," Daniel said when Liam completed his first clean SOS sequence. "Now try this one." He tapped out a new pattern. Dot dasha. Liam mimicked it perfectly. "What's that mean?" "R for Reyes." The boy's grin could have powered the shelter for a week. Elena watched from a nearby bench, her expression caught between gratitude and something more complicated. When Liam successfully spelled his own name in Morse code, Lim, she pressed a hand to her mouth. Daniel caught her eye over Liam's head. "Caseworker come by yet?" She nodded. "We're being transferred to a transitional housing unit this afternoon. It's nicer than I expected." Daniel grunted. "Good." Liam tugged on his sleeve. "Will you visit us there?" The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Daniel studied the boy's face, the smattering of freckles across his nose, the stubbornness at his jaw that reminded him too much of young privates fresh out of boot camp. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A map he'd drawn that morning with his address and phone number. "You ever need me, you call. Or show up. Either works." Liam took it like it was a holy grail, carefully tucking it into his jeans pocket. Then, without warning, he threw his arms around Daniel's waist in a fierce hug. Daniel stiffened instinctively before forcing himself to relax. He patted Liam's back awkwardly. All right. Save the mushy stuff for when you've mastered the whole alphabet." Liam pulled back, grinning. "I will. I'll practice every day." Elena stood, brushing invisible lint from her jeans. "We should go pack." Her voice was carefully neutral, but the way she looked at Daniel carried unspoken questions. He stood too, gathering the flashlights. "Keep yours," he told Liam, handing it over. "Mine's coming with me." Liam clutched the flashlight to his chest. "So you'll remember to come back?" Daniel met Elena's gaze over the boy's head. Something passed between them. An understanding, maybe a truce. "Yeah, kid," he said quietly. "So I remember." The walk back to his truck felt longer than it should have. Daniel didn't turn around to see them watching him leave. Didn't need to. The weight of the remaining flashlight in his pocket was reminder enough. The empty chair. The transitional housing unit turned out to be a modest duplex on the quieter side of Cedar Ridge, its small yard bordered by a chain-link fence. Daniel parked his truck across the street 3 days later, watching as Liam chased a soccer ball around the patchy grass. The boy moved differently here, shoulders looser, laughter coming easier. He hadn't noticed Daniel yet, too focused on kicking the ball against the side of the house in a steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Daniel grabbed the brown paper bag from his passenger seat and stepped out of the truck. Liam spotted him mid-kick, the ball sailing wide as he froze. Then he was running, bare feet slapping against the pavement. "You came." "Told you I would." Daniel held out the bag. "Brought dinner." Liam peeked inside, his nose wrinkling at the scent of burgers and fries. "Mom's at her job interview. The shelter got her one at the grocery store." Daniel nodded. He'd figured as much when he saw the empty driveway. "You staying here alone?" "Ms. Ruiz from next door is watching me." Liam jerked his thumb toward the adjoining duplex, where an elderly woman peered through her screen door. She gave Daniel a wary once-over before disappearing inside. Liam bounced on his toes. "Want to see my room? I got the top bunk, even though there's nobody on the bottom." Daniel followed him inside, the duplex smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and new paint. The living room was sparse but clean, a donated couch facing a small TV. Liam's sneakers left faint grass stains on the carpet as he bounded down the hallway. The bedroom was barely big enough for the bunk beds, but Liam had clearly made it his own. A stack of library books on the windowsill. The flashlight Daniel gave him placed carefully on the pillow. "You been practicing?" Daniel asked, nodding toward it. Liam scrambled onto the top bunk and grabbed the flashlight. "Watch!" His small fingers moved deliberately. SOS, Daniel confirmed. "What else?" Liam's brow furrowed in concentration. He tapped out a slower sequence. R, Daniel said. "For Reyes." The boy beamed. "I've been practicing every night after Mom falls asleep." He hesitated. "I made one for you, too. But it's harder." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "Try me?" Liam took a deep breath. His fingers moved carefully. F, Daniel said automatically. Then blinked. "Wait." The boy wasn't done. Another letter. A. Then R. Daniel's throat tightened as he pieced it together. "FR, Dad." Liam whispered, his knuckles white around the flashlight. "That's what I used to call him before." The air left Daniel's lungs like he'd taken a punch. He'd expected Morse code practice, not landmines. Liam stared at his lap. "Ms. Ruiz says I shouldn't talk about him, that it upsets Mom." Daniel forced himself to breathe. "Some things are hard to talk about," he said carefully. "But that doesn't mean you shouldn't." Liam's head snapped up. "Do you have hard things?" The question hung between them. Daniel could have lied, could have changed the subject, but the boy's eyes were too sharp, too knowing. "Yeah," he admitted, "I do." Liam considered this, swinging his legs over the edge of the bunk. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel nodded. "I'm glad you're not my dad." Liam said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "Dads are supposed to be nice. You're more like—" He chewed his lip. "Like a superhero. The kind that doesn't wear a cape." Daniel barked a laugh before he could stop himself. "I'm no superhero, kid." "You are to me." Liam scrambled down from the bunk, landing with a thud. "Want to see my soccer moves?" The moment passed as quickly as it came, the heavy conversation giving way to the boundless energy of a 9-year-old. Daniel followed him back outside, the paper bag of burgers forgotten on the kitchen counter. As Liam dribbled the ball across the lawn, Daniel studied the duplex front window, the empty chair visible through glass, the job application form spread across the table. Elena was trying. So was Liam. And for the first time in years, Daniel realized, so was he. The breaking point. The rain came down in sheets as Daniel pulled up to the duplex a week later, windshield wipers struggling to keep pace. He'd texted Elena that morning, bringing pizza, 6 p.m., and received nothing but a thumbs-up emoji in response. Something fell off before he even reached the door. No Liam waiting on the porch. No lights on in the living room. Just a steady drum of rain on pavement, and the uneasy twist in his gut that had kept him alive in combat zones. Daniel knocked harder than necessary. "Elena?" The door swung open to reveal Liam in pajamas, his face pale. Behind him, the living room looked like a tornado had hit. Couch cushions overturned, a lamp shattered on the floor. Daniel was inside in 2 strides. "What happened?" Liam's lower lip trembled. "Mom got a letter." Elena emerged from the kitchen then, her movements sluggish. The bruise on her wrist had faded to a sickly yellow, but new shadows haunted her eyes. In her hand, a single sheet of paper. Daniel took it without asking. Motion for early release. The header read. His stomach dropped as he scanned the legalese. Reduced sentence. Good behavior. Hearing scheduled for next Thursday. Mark Carter was getting out. Elena sank onto the arm of the couch, her voice hollow. His family has money. Paid for some hotshot lawyer. Liam edged closer to Daniel, small fingers gripping the hem of his shirt. Does this mean he's coming back? No. The word came out sharper than Daniel intended. He forced himself to soften his tone. No, kid, that's not happening. Elena laughed, a brittle, broken sound. You don't know that. The restraining order didn't stop him before. Daniel studied the paper again, his mind racing. The system had failed him once already. He wouldn't let it happen again. Pack a bag, he said abruptly. Elena blinked. What? Both of you. Enough for a few days. He met her gaze head on. You're not staying here. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then with a slow nod, she stood. Liam, go get your things. Clothes, your books, the flashlight. As Liam darted down the hallway, Daniel pulled out his phone. He had a buddy from the Corps who owned a cabin near Lake Tahoe, isolated, secure, and most importantly, off-grid. Elena watched him dial, her arms crossed tight over her chest. We can't just run forever. Daniel pocketed the phone. Not forever, just until the hearing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. They'll deny his release if you testify. Really testify this time. Her breath hitched. And if they don't, then I'll be in the front row when they do. The quiet certainty in his voice seemed to startle her. But first, we get you both somewhere safe. Liam reappeared then, dragging a backpack twice his size. I packed my Morse code book too, he announced, as if this might earn him extra points. Daniel ruffled the boy's hair, a gesture that would have felt unnatural weeks ago. Good thinking. Elena disappeared into her bedroom, emerging minutes later with a duffel bag. Her hands shook as she zipped it closed. Where are we going? Someplace he won't find you. Daniel took the bags from them both, his grip steady. My truck's out front. Liam hesitated in the doorway, looking back at the duplex. The first real home he'd had in months. What if we never come back? Daniel followed his gaze to the overturned furniture, the broken lamp, the invisible scars left by a man who made a child afraid of his own shadow. Then we build something better, he said simply. The rain had eased to a drizzle as they loaded up the truck. Liam climbed into the back seat with his backpack clutched to his chest, eyes wide with equal parts fear and excitement. Elena paused with her hand on the passenger door, her gaze searching Daniel's face. Why are you doing this? The question hung between them, heavier than the rain. Daniel thought of the drawing still tucked in his wallet. The SOS signal that had started it all. The way Liam had looked at him that first day, like he was worth trusting. He opened the truck door for her. Because you asked. As they pulled away from the duplex, Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. Liam was already nodding off, his head lolling against the window. In the fading light, the boy's fingers moved absently against his thigh, tapping out Morse code only he could understand. Dash R for Reyes. The safe house. The cabin smelled like pine and damp wood, the kind of earthy scent that clung to your clothes long after you left. Daniel jiggled the key in the stubborn lock until the door finally gave way with a groan. Home, sweet home, he muttered, flicking on the lights. Liam pushed past him, backpack bouncing as he took in the single-room space. Wooden beams, a stone fireplace, bunk beds wedged into the far corner. This is awesome. Elena lingered in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm night air. Whose place is this? Buddy from the Corps. Daniel tossed his keys on the rough-hewn table. He won't be back from deployment for months. Liam was already climbing the ladder to the top bunk. Can we make a fire? Do you know how to make s'mores? Is there bears here? No, maybe and not usually. Daniel dragged the duffel bags inside, his shoulders tight with the weight of the unspoken tension. He caught Elena's eye and nodded toward the porch. Outside, the night was alive with crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. Elena leaned against the railing, her fingers tracing the peeling paint. He's putting on a brave face, she said quietly. Daniel studied the tree line beyond the cabin. Kids are resilient. Not that resilient. She turned to face him, moonlight catching the tears in her eyes. He had nightmares every night this week. wakes up screaming about his stepdad coming through the window. The image settled like a stone in Daniel's gut. He'd seen battle-hardened Marines flinch at less. "We'll stop the early release," he said, more to convince himself than her. Elena shook her head. "You don't know Mark. He doesn't lose. Ever." A bitter laugh escaped her. "First time he hit me, he said no one would believe the word of a diner waitress over a banker with a golf club membership." Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. "They will this time." Inside, Liam's voice carried through the thin walls. "Daniel, there's spiders in the corner. Like a whole family of them." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We should..." "Yeah." Daniel pushed off the railing. "Go settle him in. I'll check the perimeter." The perimeter was just a gravel driveway and 50 feet of trees in every direction, but old habits died hard. Daniel made a slow circuit of the property, testing windows, checking sightlines. The cabin was isolated, nearest neighbor 3 miles down a mountain, but isolation went both ways. When he came back inside, Elena was tucking Liam into the bottom bunk, despite his protests. "But the top one's cooler. And you'll break your neck sleepwalking," Elena countered, smoothing his hair back. "First sign of spiders and you're downgraded." Daniel crouched by the fireplace, stacking logs with practiced efficiency. The flames caught quickly, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Liam peered over the edge of the bunk. "Are you going to tell us a ghost story?" "Only one I know would give you nightmares for a month." Daniel poked at the fire. "How about I teach you something useful instead?" Liam sat up so fast, he nearly brained himself on the upper bunk. "Like what?" Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his multi-tool, flipping open the blade. Elena stiffened, but he ignored her, turning the handle toward Liam. "Knife safety." Liam's eyes went round. "For real? For real?" Daniel kept his voice even. "You're old enough to learn how to not accidentally stab yourself." Elena opened her mouth to protest probably, but then closed it again. She gave a tiny, resigned nod. The lesson lasted 20 minutes. How to hold it, how to pass it safely, why you never wave it around like an idiot. Liam listened with rapt attention, his small hands clumsy but earnest as he practiced gripping the handle. When Daniel finally confiscated the tool, bedtime for commandos, Liam didn't argue, just yawned and burrowed under the blankets. Elena waited until his breathing evened out before speaking. "You're preparing him." Daniel banked the fire, avoiding her gaze. Basic survival skills never hurt anybody. "He's 9, and Carter's a predator." Daniel finally looked up, the firelight carving deep shadows across his face. "Predators go after the vulnerable. I'm making sure Liam doesn't stay vulnerable." Elena's breath hitched. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and Liam's soft snores. Then, "So quiet," he almost missed it. "Teach me to..." Daniel stilled. "What?" Her hands clenched in her lap. "Whatever you're teaching him. I want to learn." The raw determination in her voice reminded him suddenly of Liam standing in that driveway, flashlight in hand. Terrified but refusing to back down, Daniel nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. First lesson, how to break a man's nose." A startled laugh escaped Elena. "That's morbidly specific. Most useful things are..." He stood, brushing with dust from his jeans. "Get some sleep? I'll take first watch." "You're really going to..." "Yes." Daniel checked the lock on the front door, then settled into the rickety chair beside it. The Glock from his truck's safe now rested comfortably against his lower back. No one's getting in tonight. Elena studied him for a long moment before retreating to the bottom bunk, curling protectively around her son. The fire burned low, painting the cabin in warm hues. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees like whispered warnings. Daniel kept his eyes on the door, his fingers tapping an absent rhythm against his thigh. R. For ready. The calm before. Morning light filtered to the cabin's dusty windows, painting stripes across the wooden floor. Daniel blinked awake in the armchair, his neck stiff from the awkward angle. The fire had burned down to embers, but the cabin still held the night's warmth. A rustling sound drew his attention. Elena stood at the small kitchenette. cracking eggs into a cast-iron skillet. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal after last night's tension. "You're supposed to be sleeping," Daniel rasped, rubbing the grit from his eyes. Elena glanced over her shoulder. Someone had to make breakfast. She nodded toward the table. "Coffee's fresh." Daniel stood with a groan, his joints popping. The first sip of coffee burned his tongue, but he welcomed the jolt of caffeine. A thump came from the bunk area. Liam emerged like a tornado, his hair sticking up in every direction. "I smelled bacon." "Eggs," Elena corrected. "And toast." "Sit." Liam plopped into a chair across from Daniel, his legs swinging. "Did you really stay up all night guarding us?" Daniel took another sip of coffee. "Marines don't need sleep." Liam's eyes widened. "Really?" "No." Elena deadpanned, setting plates on the table. He's being sarcastic. The boy shoveled eggs into his mouth with alarming speed. "What are we doing today? Can we explore the woods? Is there a lake? Can we—" "First," Daniel interrupted, "we're going over the rules." Liam groaned. Elena shot him a look. Daniel held up 3 fingers. 1, you don't go outside alone. Ever. 2, if you see or hear anything strange, you tell an adult immediately. 3, he leveled a look at Liam. No play with a knife unless I'm supervising. Liam slumped at his chair. "That's boring." "Safety's boring until you need it," Daniel said. He pushed back from the table. "Now finish eating. We got work to do." The work turned out to be a crash course in basic self-defense. Daniel started with the fundamentals. Stance, balance, how to throw a punch without breaking your thumb. Liam took to it with surprising focus, his small face scrunched in concentration as he practiced keeping his guard up. Elena was more hesitant at first, her movement stiff with self-consciousness, but something shifted when Daniel adjusted her stance. "Again," he said, stepping back. Elena threw a punch. Better form this time. Again. Her third attempt had real force behind it. By midday, they graduated to escape techniques, how to break wrist grabs, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. Liam giggled uncontrollably every time he escaped Daniel's hold, but Elena's intensity never wavered. During a water break, Liam wandered to the edge of the clearing, poking at something in the dirt with a stick. Daniel watched him from the porch, the boys' laughter carrying on the breeze. "He's tougher than he looks," Elena said, joining him. She pressed a cold water bottle to her bruised knuckles. Daniel grunted. Kids usually are. A comfortable silence settled between them. Somewhere in the trees, a woodpecker tapped out a staccato rhythm. Elena's voice was quiet when she spoke again. "The hearing's in 3 days." Daniel studied the tree line. "I know. What if—" She stopped, swallowed. "What if they let him out?" The unspoken question hung between them. Daniel turned to face her fully. "Then we disappear." Her breath caught. "Just like that. Just like that." The certainty in his voice surprised even him. "I know people. Places we can go where Carter will never find you." Elena searched his face, looking for something, doubt, maybe, or hesitation. She must not have found it, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. Liam's shout interrupted them. "Daniel, come see what I found." The boys stood at the edge of the woods, jumping up and down. Daniel approached cautiously, scanning for threats out of habit. Liam pointed triumphantly at the ground. "Look, a deer skull." Sure enough, a bleached white skull lay half buried in the leaves, antlers still attached. Daniel crouched for a better look. "Good find. Probably a buck, judging by the size. Can I keep it?" Liam's eyes shone with excitement. Daniel glanced back at Elena, who made a face but shrugged. "Sure, but wash it first. And no bringing it to the dinner table." Liam whooped, carefully extracting his prize from the dirt. As he scampered back toward the cabin, Daniel caught Elena watching them with an expression he couldn't quite place. "What?" She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Nothing. Just thank you." Daniel didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. Instead, he followed Liam inside, the weight of the coming days settling over him like storm clouds on the horizon. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days until everything changed. The hearing. The courthouse steps were crowded with people. Lawyers in sharp suits, families clutching paperwork, reporters waiting for their next story. Daniel stood slightly apart from the chaos, his back against a pillar, watching, waiting. Elena emerged first, her face pale but determined. Liam trailed behind her, gripping her hand like a lifeline. The moment she spotted Daniel, her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "Well," he asked as they approached. Elena exhaled sharply. "Denied." The word hit Daniel like a physical blow. He hadn't realized how much tension he'd been carrying until it evaporated. Liam tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Does this mean we can go home now?" Elena smoothed his hair back. "Soon, Mijo. We just need to." "Ms. Carter," a woman in a navy blazer approached, her heels clicking against the concrete. "I'm with Victim Services. Do you have a moment?" Daniel stepped forward instinctively, but Elena shook her head slightly. "It's okay," she murmured. "I've got this." As Elena spoke with the social worker, Liam sidled up to Daniel. "Can we get ice cream?" "To celebrate." Daniel studied the boy's face, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he kept glancing around like he expected his stepfather to materialize. The hearing might be over, but the fear wasn't. "Not yet." "Yeah," Daniel said finally. "We can get ice cream." They ended up at a diner down the street, the kind with sticky vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Liam demolished a chocolate sundae while Elena picked at a salad, her phone buzzing constantly with calls from the shelter, the prosecutor's office, the housing authority. Daniel sipped his black coffee, watching them. This was it, the moment he'd been both dreading and anticipating. They were safe now. They didn't need him anymore. Liam licked chocolate off his spoon. "Daniel, can you teach me how to fish next?" "Mom says the cabin has a lake." Elena set her phone down. "Liam, Daniel probably has his own life to get back to." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel stared into his coffee cup, suddenly fascinated by the dregs. Liam's face fell. "Oh!" A long silence stretched. The jukebox cycled to a new song, something old and twangy about lost love. Elena took a deep breath. "Unless you want to come fishing with us sometime." Daniel looked up. Elena's expression was carefully neutral, but her fingers tapped nervously against her water glass. Liam stared at him with those two big eyes, hope written all over his face. The right thing would be to walk away. Clean break. They had their lives back. He had his. But then Liam's hand crept across the table, small fingers brushing Daniel's scarred knuckles, the same way he'd done that first day in the driveway, when he'd chosen a stranger to trust. Daniel turned his hand over, letting the boy grip his fingers. "Yeah," he said roughly, "I could do that." Liam beamed. Elena's shoulders relaxed, her smile real this time. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the sidewalk in gold. The world kept turning, carrying them forward together. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage and connection. Real heroes walk among us. Help us share their stories by passing this along. Who in your life needs to hear this today?